Greetings shippers, welcome back, and it's time to take a look at a video voted for by the lovely folks over on Patreon. This one is a bit of a classic. Not an original classic, but a fandom renaissance classic. Lots of different fandom classics. This is taking us back to a very bustling period of fandom activity indeed. We're going to be taking a look at OOQ, the pairing of Agent James Bond 007 and his quartermaster, Q. First off, thank you to everyone who voted. We get some really interesting videos that way. And this month, OOQ just barely edged out adjacent shipping. It was a nail biter. Before we get started, if you haven't already, please do follow on social media to stay up to date, know when we're streaming, and just come on over and chit chat about fandom. It's a good time, I swear. If you love hearing about all these different fandoms, hit that like button. Now let's go back to the early 2010s and take a look at OOQ, which no matter how one feels about it is a fantastic ship name. I wanted some kind of great pun to start this off, but all I've got is this little cat here, my daughter's cat, so I'll stroke it like a Bond villain. Yes. This pairing explodes during the era of Craig Bond. James Bond is a secret agent created by author Ian Fleming in 1952, with the first novel being published in 1953. After years of successful novels, the agent hit the big screen for the first time in 1962, with the film Dr. No, an adaptation of the sixth novel, with Sean Connery playing the titular role. From that period, the agent has found himself on the big screen over and over throughout the decades, though there tend to be gaps in between production, and the eras of Bond can hence be divided into the actors who play them, who also happen to coincide with a particular period of film style most of the time. Daniel Craig took over the reins from Pierce Brosnan, whose last outing had been Die Another Day in 2002, which had been met with mixed reception and complaints that the plots were getting a little ludicrous, even for Bond, again. Craig first appeared as Bond in the 2006 film Casino Royale, the third adaptation of the novel of that name, which also happened to be the first Bond novel from back in 1953. This film saw a renewed interest in Bond, and was praised for its shift in tone towards grit and realism from a cinematic standpoint at least, which was a trend in films very much on the rise, particularly in the action genre, with series like The Bourne Identity having taken firm root in the minds of filmgoers when it came to the aforementioned genre. So fans appreciated this different take on Bond. The sequel, Quantum of Solace, released in 2008, had more of a lukewarm reception, and there were many who mocked its water-driven plot. However, things turned around again for Skyfall in 2012, which for our purposes is where the shipping journey begins, for this is the first film in the Craigverse wherein Q appears. It was even a selling point, as fans had noted the character's absence. This outing would see the character tweaked, from wizened older mentor figure, or vaguely wizened comic inventor figure, to slightly awkward, young, cute, genius figure in the form of Ben Whishaw. The casting is also particularly important, as it did help the pairing along, as Ben Whishaw in 2012 was on a bit of a fandom high. People had really taken to him since his turn as Sebastian Flight in the Modern Brideshead Revisited film adaptation, and wherever he appeared, he was a bit of a fandom and now, given the time period, Tumblr darling. While it may have seemed a small shift, in fandom, it changed everything for a lot of people, and created a viable ship where before for many there had been none, which was not to say it was non-existent, but Skyfall brought it to life and very much charted the course that this ship would sail. It also helped that Skyfall was purposely dabbling in queer themes. Other Bond films had done this, but not so purposefully. It started a discussion about Bond's sexuality that led well into fueling the ship, which already had plenty of fuel to go on. From first meeting, fans were hooked, and the fandom would also take on some interesting attributes because of other popular fandoms at the time, as 2012 was a year of many crossovers. It also happened to be the year of Rise of the Brave Tangled Dragons, but for our video's purposes, it graced the world with a specific form of bond lock. More on that later. So what was drawing people to this ship, aside from the outward appeal of both actors portraying the titular characters, which, as it often does, did play a role, which some took issue with, others not so much, though there are some who feel it was the only reason for this pairing. While it may have been a catalyst for certain shippers, there was more going on beneath the surface. Q appears for a brief period within Skyfall, and yet has some clearly defined traits, and enough is established to showcase the type of relationship him and this Bond would share. This seemed an intriguing combination of enthusiastic, brilliant, but also hardened and capable, a match for Bond in ways that Q's of the past hadn't been. They seemed to be more on an even keel. Fans also took to the dynamics of their first meeting, with Bond underestimating Q, some going so far as to read it as a flirtatious first encounter.
What do you see?
A bloody big ship. Excuse me.
007. I'm your new quartermaster.
You must be joking.
Why, because I'm not wearing a lab coat?
Because you still have spots.
My complexion is hardly relevant.
Your competence is.
Age is no guarantee of efficiency.
And youth is no guarantee of innovation.
There were some who wanted to turn the Bond and Lady of the Week or movie formula on its head, and work through the idea of Bond trying to seduce and impress a more unflappable Q. And the fandom does enjoy its fair share of smut, but also of espionage pieces, and Bond suddenly needing Q's assistance, or vice versa. Also, co-parenting cat fics, catboy fics, just cat fics in general. There's also a decent amount of domestic pieces as well. There were also those who saw the fandom exploding, got a look at the characters via GIFs or art, and wanted to get in on the action. And so you had some intriguing pieces, building the characters essentially from the ground up based on outside knowledge of the lore. Transformative fans also latched onto it, for while James Bond does have a large dedicated fan base, its shipping contingent is smaller and more sporadic, being roused into action by surprise twists or characters that incite shippability, as was the case with 006 and 007 in GoldenEye. So when something so shippable presented itself in a Bond that was so popular and widely accessed, including by a new generation of fans, the amount of push the ship got was understandable, especially as it had the building blocks of a popular ship already, and there was much room to play with how one presented the characters and scenarios. 2012 was also a bit of a fandom highlight in terms of the Renaissance, which had begun in earnest in the early aughts. In 2012, Supernatural was in its 8th and one of its most overtly Destiel-y seasons. Sherlock and John Locke were in full swing with the release of Series 2. Doctor Who Series 7 had lots of fans talking, and Tumblr was at its peak before it would begin to decline in 2013. It was what many would deem a bit of a fandom golden age in terms of variety of content, as what was mentioned is only skimming the surface. In short, it was a fertile playing ground, and 00Q quickly rose to be the dominant ship within the James Bond fandom, and it would remain there, as 2015 Spectre would see a bit of an increased role for Q, if not in terms of length, than in actions taken, and in fleshing out the type of relationship he had with Bond.
Well, that narrows it down. Look, I'm sorry, 007, but time's up. My whole career is on the line here. Either you come back in and do this through proper channels, or I go directly to M.
Do one more thing for me. Then you're out. Find out what you can from this.
I really, really hate you right now.
Thank you, Q.
The two have an even more bantery relationship, and spoke together even more like equals, reaffirming the dynamic, and for shippers, they were already watching through a shippable lens. And this film provided plenty of inspiration for continued fics and works starring these two. It felt as though there was a friendship, a bond, pun intended, even if at times 007 used Q's affection for him and his curiosity against him. It was a ship built on small moments, fueled and expanded upon by fans to create a rich fanon universe, which drew more and more fans into it. While Spectre met a mixed reception, this pairing kept going strong and was not challenged by any of the other options presented. People just loved their experienced Bond and eager young Q. Charting the rise of this ship was also relatively easy. Not only did Tumblr explode with GIFs and the like, but one could follow the increase in fics being posted on archiving juggernaut AO3, aka an archive of our own. 7 months after the film's release, there were 1,605 stories under the tag James Bond/Q. By 10 months after Spectre, there were 4,500, and the number continues to rise to this day. Not a juggernaut in general fandom terms, but definitely one for the Bond fandom. So let us quickly touch on Bondlock, as it is unique to this time period in fandom. For a time, there was a headcanon that Q was a Holmes, in a secret Holmes sibling reveal that would probably have been better received than the one fans actually got in 2017. This was largely because the quirky mannerisms, the hair, the genius, the slight abrasiveness, reminded certain fans of Sherlock. And since crossovers were rife in 2012 and both fandoms were so popular, this headcanon was able to take flight. In most of these, Q was the youngest Holmes brother, and Mycroft had a significant and secret role, and you would have the usual having to meet the family fair, or overprotective Holmes brothers. We all know James doesn't have the best romantic reputation. This could sometimes go into another direction of Sherlock and James Bond, which would sometimes share the name, but it mostly stayed within this aforementioned headcanon. It was a very fun headcanon, but one that is not overly employed at the time of this recording. Another common fic one could expect to find was poor Q never getting his equipment back, in one piece or at all. There were also post-Spectre fix-its, because of how that film ended, with the characters going their separate ways. But Bond will be back. He can't help it. He has a problem. So those are some reasons for shipping this couple. But why were some not here for it? Well, as mentioned, Bond has a more traditional fan base, and not all of them are involved in transformative fandom. So for many, it simply was not a thought process they engage in. While it can be hard to recollect for the shipper, there are many who find the most banal of ships to be shocking and unnecessary, and the appeal is not seen, nor is how creative the works can be, and what is instead seen is an excess of zeal and a misplacement of fan enthusiasm. Others were annoyed, as mentioned, they felt it was all because the two characters were hot, and shippers were watching with shipping goggles and the need to fetishize any characters that breathe in the same scene, and they did not feel there was any chemistry or anything to draw upon based on what was presented. With Bond, you also deal with a certain rigidity of view from certain subsets of fandom when it comes to his sexuality, which does not leave room for male-male pairings. On the whole though, most who did not like it stayed away from it, and contented themselves with the usual, "Can you imagine caring what the characters get up to in their free time?" Sad arguments, deriding shipping culture. As for the fandom itself, it was a relatively calm and pleasant experience for those within, though it could get a bit overwhelming if one did not ship this pairing and favored something else, or simply wanted some gen fiction. It wasn't as bad as it was with Arthur and Eames in the Inception fandom, but some could feel left out or pushed out. Still, on the whole, it was a realm of shared headcanons, fic bangs, gifs, vids, art, and more, and for many it remains a fond fandom memory, while some still actively participate and hope the next Bond film could give them even more. Were you a 00Q shipper, or is there some other Bond pairing that strikes your fancy? If you were into this, did you get into it in 2012 or did you join later? Share all your thoughts down below, and you know the drill. Answer as many questions as possible, numbered if possible, because I love a good essay comment. Thank you so much for watching. I always appreciate you taking some time out of your day to spend it discussing shipping with me. There are, as always, more videos coming soon, so if you haven't already, please do subscribe and hit that bell notification so that you never miss a vid. I have one perfect curl this video. I'm so sad that it's not all over my entire head. Boingy, boingy, boingy. I will see you all again when I can, and until then, let's get the outro. Bye-bye. This has been Shipper's Guide to the Galaxy. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Special thanks to all of my patrons, names on the side, for helping to make these videos possible. There are, as always, more videos coming soon, so until then, stay tuned, for there are as many ships out there as there are stars in the sky.